All right, welcome back to WMMA Scene Now with your host Chuck Stevenson, coming at you today with a special fight preview. So we're going to Bellator 254 at the Mohegan Sun. We're going to the main event in the Flyweight division, Women's Flyweight Championship. Ilima-lei, the Illimanator Macfarlane, the defending champ, taking on the challenger, Juliana Velasquez. Now this is a fight that I've been calling for probably at least 2 years now, going on 2 years at least, that I've been calling for this fight. It just seems like it was the fight to make. 2 straight years in a row, they had Velasquez fight either the night before or on the same night as Macfarlane in Hawaii, and yet Bellator just did not make this fight. They've each fought several times, between then. And it just started to seem like the fight was never going to get made. I even, started accusing Bellator of putting, Macfarlane under a protection plan. It was getting really doubtful that this fight was ever going to get made, but now it has finally been made. Looks like it's finally going to happen. Keep your fingers crossed because it's still a week and 2 days away as I record this. So keep the fingers crossed that this fight happens and gets done, because it should be a good one and a very interesting matchup as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at the statistics here. The champ coming in undefeated at 11-0, most recently coming off a win over Kate Jackson via decision 11 months ago. The challenger coming in undefeated as well at 10-0, most recently taking a win over via unanimous decision as well, on either the same day or like 1 day apart. I can't remember now. Anyway, the Brazilian challenger will be the elder of the two at 34 years old to Macfarlane's 30 years old. Velasquez will have a height advantage, 5 feet 6 inches, 167 centimeters to Macfarlane's 5 feet 4 inches, 163 centimeters. And the challenger will have a reach advantage as well, 67.5 inches, 171 centimeters to Macfarlane's 66.5, 169 centimeters reach. So when I was doing my film study on these two, or video study as it were, because obviously there's no real film going around anymore. And one thing that really helped out was that these two had two opponents in common in Rebecca Ruth and Alejandra Lara, and obviously, these two fighters beat both of those fighters because they're still undefeated. But it really helped to show a contrast in the styles that these two fight with and how they tackle other fighters' styles in comparison. So let's talk about Macfarlane first, the challenger. Macfarlane is definitely a specialist in that she is a grappler. Honestly, I haven't seen much growth in her striking. She tends to come out and she has like a single-minded determination to get the fight to the ground. Sometimes she'll come out, walk her opponent down, and won't even throw a strike. She'll just go straight for a double leg takedown. And it's almost like single-minded determination. And one thing is, when she gets the fight to the ground, she is always going to be hunting for the submission. Everything she does, whether it's passing guard, improving her position, throwing ground and pound, everything she is going to do is with the submission in mind. She is setting up an eventual submission. So she comes out, she avoids striking, does whatever she has to do to get the fight to the ground, like I said, single-minded, almost dogged determination to get the fight to the ground. And from there, she's always going to be hunting for that submission. As far as her striking goes, she tends to strike only if forced to, because her takedown was stopped, or in order to get close enough to close for the clinch or the takedown. For example, when she fought Alejandra Lara, first round, she went straight for the takedown. Second and third round, she threw a few punches, but mostly just enough to get close enough for either the clinch or the takedown. Now, as far as her takedowns go, they're not the greatest takedowns, and she doesn't she rarely actually sets them up properly. She tends to force them, or sometimes she'll use her opponent's momentum against them to get the takedown. Now that's very nice, but a lot of times it's just she's really forcing that takedown sometimes. And that's, I think, one of her biggest weaknesses, is that she doesn't properly set up her takedowns to make them come easier. She'll force them if she has to. Now the challenger, Juliana Velasquez, on the other hand, she's a strong grappler as well. She's on the judo national team in Brazil, or was, and she fights out of Team Nogueira, which is, the Nogueira brothers. Last I heard, she was a purple. She might be a brown belt through them now, but she's also a judo black belt. Now what sets her apart from Macfarlane is that Velasquez is a decent striker, and she throws powerful strikes. Almost every time I've seen her fight, her opponents come out looking like they absolutely got beat up. I mean, Bruna Ellen was all bruised up. Alejandra Lara was all bruised up. She finished Rebecca Ruth with a kick to the stomach that just got right in there and dug into the gut. And Rebecca Ruth just bowled over and was done. So she has that ground game, but she also has that striking game that she's not afraid to stand up and fight with fighters who are primarily strikers. And one thing that is opposite to Macfarlane as well is that Velasquez is a patient striker. Or excuse me, she's a patient fighter. She tends to take her time. She's not going to force a finish. She's not going to try to force anything. She's not going to be hunting for something. She's going to take her time, be patient, bide her time, and if a finish presents itself, then she'll look for it. She'll go for it. She'll look for the opportunities rather than trying to force them. Now, sometimes it tends to work a little bit against her. I believe her fight against Alejandra Lara was a split decision, which should not, I don't know what that other judge saw, but obviously her hesitancy to sometimes really drive the momentum of the fight can work against her, and she's a little bit too patient. Also, she tends to be a little bit slow moving. Now, she is very smooth with her movements, but it's a little slow, and sometimes I think that it might affect her reaction time as well. So obviously we're talking about two fighters who are almost polar opposites. They have the same base, but the way they go about fighting is almost polar opposites for two fighters with the same base. Now, as far as the fight goes, I believe that forward momentum is going to be the key here. You watch these two fight, both like to be the one leading the fight, walking their opponent down, and controlling the octagon, controlling the fight. So whoever comes out and starts to assert themselves first is going to have a huge advantage over their opponent in controlling the fight, leading the momentum, controlling the cage, and looking like they're the one in charge on the judges' scorecards. Now, I think Macfarlane is going to come out, and she's likely going to avoid the striking and try to go for an early takedown. And I can't blame her. I would not want to get punched by Juliana Velasquez either if I was her. Velasquez hits hard. So Macfarlane is likely going to come out, do whatever it takes to get close to go for the takedown. If she has to strike a little bit to do it, she'll do it, but it'll be just enough to get in close. Now, Velasquez, I believe that if the fight gets to the ground, Velasquez should be able to hold her own on the ground against Macfarlane. But why bother? If I were Velasquez, I would look to keep it standing. If she can stop Macfarlane's takedown, she's going to put Macfarlane really into a world of trouble, because Macfarlane has not really evolved her striking game enough to be able to stand with someone, a heavy-handed hitter like Velasquez. So if I were Velasquez, I would try to prevent the takedown, go to the ground if necessary, but at the same time, if it's not necessary, then don't bother. Keep it standing, keep it up where she's going to have a clear advantage over the champion. Now, for Macfarlane, she needs to be on the hunt. If the opportunities aren't presenting themselves, she needs to force them, which she has a habit of doing. Like, she's a hunter. She's looking for opportunities to advance, to get to that submission. And that's what she needs to do here. She can't really just bide her time against someone like Velasquez, who's going to be putting a hurt on her, or trying to at least. Now for Velasquez, final note here, she needs to be careful that she doesn't take her time too much. Like I said, sometimes she's a little too patient. But if she does it too much here, she could risk falling behind on the scorecards and looking like she's on the defensive against Macfarlane, who's almost always going to be on the attack, trying to get the fight to the ground, trying to get that takedown. You don't want to be on the defensive all the time. Even if you are successfully defending and fighting the fighter off of you, if you look like you're on the defensive, the judges are going to see that, and a lot of the time they'll award it to your opponent if you looks like you're on the defense all the time. Okay, so those are my thoughts on each fighter and how the fight is going to go. Now, as far as my prediction goes, if you would have asked me like 6 to 8 months ago, I'd have known who I was going to pick right away. Reading the tape study and, knowing that both of these two have been out for just shy of a year, I think it gets a little bit closer. And, some of the weaknesses I pointed out in each fighter has me wondering if they're going to be able to do what it takes in order to get the win here. I'm going to go with Juliana Velasquez to win this fight. I think it's not going to be quite as easy for her, and I think she's really going to have to work for it. But I believe that if she can prevent that takedown and keep Macfarlane on the feet, or be the one on top and landing some hard ground and pound on the ground to keep Macfarlane from working for her submissions off the back, then Velasquez should be able to win this fight. For Macfarlane, she's going to have to really work for that takedown and just be on the offensive at all times. And you know what? That can be tiring, especially for a fighter who is self-admittedly kind of lazy and, likes to get out of shape in between fights. So whereas someone like Velasquez, who probably stays in shape year-round and is always in the gym, you got Macfarlane, who goes months between fights without going into the gym and basically starts every fight camp with having to get back into shape. And I think that's going to affect her cardio. So for Velasquez, I would try to keep the fight standing and try to keep Macfarlane out of Macfarlane's comfort zone and more into an area where Velasquez, it might not be her primary style, but she's more than comfortable enough into it. So I'm going to go with Juliana Velasquez to win this fight. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Now, if you liked the video, please give it a like, share it as well. That's how word of the channel spreads. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to WMMA Scene Now, the most complete women's mixed martial arts dedicated platform on YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.